I can't tell you how many times I would go and just scream and cry in the shower and then come out and be like, all right, I'm ready to go. Because I was in such a dark place for a long time. I had to pretend I was okay.
I wanted to thank you because you did my interview and created a safe space. You know, getting to know you and kind of the backstory. Where did Jamie grow up?
I grew up in a pretty small town, very rural. I'm like 40 minutes north of Pittsburgh. I grew up pretty simple, middle child. My parents were divorced when I was 11, but up until that point, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a truck driver, so he was gone quite a bit. I had a really good, just like family dynamic. I was a cheerleader. I was, always on the homecoming, the prom court, and had a great group of friends. I'm still friends with a lot of them today.
Yeah.
Most of them still live back there. Very few of us left. I was making some poor decisions. I've got to get out of here. And becoming a flight attendant, to me, I knew a couple of people, mutual friends, that their mother was a flight attendant, their dad was a pilot. I knew that I would have a decent income, benefits. I get based in Philadelphia, so I pack up what little I have in my little Honda Civic. I only was there a short time because 9/11 happened. So I only flew for maybe like 6 months. Everybody got furloughed. And then I had to go back home to Evans City.
So tell me about your brother. So he's your older brother.
He's my older brother. Yeah, he's actually my half brother. My mom got pregnant when she was a lot younger. I think she was 18. So he never had any contact with his real father. But my mother met my dad when my brother was like, I think maybe like 16 months old.
Yeah.
So here's my dad who's 20 years old and, takes on my mom with my brother. So my dad did raise my brother.
Why I wanted to have you share that story is because there's a lot of people that experience loss, whether it's the loss of a baby, a parent, a loved one. We walk around in massive pain, denial. I read something really beautiful where it was like grieving is you have so much love with no place to go. It was so beautiful. I was thinking of how many of us have all this love and we don't know what to do with it because we've lost somebody so significant. To walk around to feel so alone and that you can't talk about it because you have all this love. If we could help somebody to not feel so alone and that, we can talk about the people we love even though they're gone. You had mentioned to me, 2 years of kind of pretending that your brother basically hadn't passed away. You didn't know how to process it.
Yeah.
I think the impact that you can have on people, I think could be monumental. If you could share kind of, what happened with your brother and then what you experienced going through that loss of somebody really close.
So my brother was 4.5 years older than me. He's so handsome. So he was always the most popular guy. Like, he played sports, but he was kind of like the guy that was also getting, a hippie, like listening to Grateful Dead and smoking pot. He was good at everything. He had bad luck though. Like if he was at a party and there was 100 people there, he was going to be the one that was going to get caught. It was like a black cloud on his head. He really did. But, everybody loved him. He moved to Colorado. So I guess he was about 24, really outdoorsy, kayaker, hiker, mountain biker, anything that was extreme and dangerous and scary. My brother was ready to do it, like always. So he moved to Durango, Colorado, and was working at like a pizza shop out there, finishing school in a college out there. And he ultimately got into a motorcycle crash one night. And that's when I was sleeping and I got a phone call and then I heard knocks at the door. And it was the police, saying that my brother's been in an accident and we need to contact, we need next of kin for some decision. So I remember panicking, thinking like, this can't be good. They're not going to come knock on your door at 3 a.m. and wake you up if this is not bad. So I already knew. I remember my mother just squealing almost, like screaming, because she knew too. We all ended up at my dad's house. Yeah. And my dad was remarried and everyone was trying to be like really positive about it. Now, Durango's a small little town. The hospitals there, the facilities, they're not anything like Pittsburgh has some amazing hospitals. It's not the case in Durango. They actually didn't even life flight my brother. They took him by ambulance. We all end up flying out there. He's obviously unconscious, hooked up to like life support machines. My brother was the type of guy that he always told my mom and I that he was never going to live to be 40. It's weird. And then if he couldn't run and play, he didn't want to live. And if he was ever in a wheelchair, he would rather be dead. That's just how he was. He had no fear. My brother was ultimately going to be, a vegetable. His injuries were brainstem, and your brainstem controls everything. He never would have had any quality of life. We could have kept him alive. And, because he was young and strong, his organs, his heart, his lungs, he was healthy on the inside. It was just the brainstem. He did have one really big cut that was an open wound, But like his face, he had not a mark on his face, really. The one thing I can see is that damn hospital room and the noises and the smell.
My grandfather's the same way. I was really close to my grandfather, and all I can picture was my last moments with him in the hospital. To this day, going into a hospital, the smell brings me right back to my grandfather passing.
I walked in there and I remember just like falling to the floor and my mom kind of helping me up. But I think it would have been, this doesn't sound not right, but I almost think it would have been better if my brother was sick. Like I could have prepare for something. When you can't prepare for something and it's just 1 second it's gone, I would give anything to have one more conversation with him. But there's not even an option for that. So I think that is what I think is so important. You just don't know when your time is. And like, don't ever think it can't happen to you, because it can. There was another kid in our hometown. He died a couple of years before this, I think, in a car accident. And I remember going to his funeral thinking, I can't even imagine this. And like a year later, I was in that fucking same funeral room.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
I look at life just breathing every day.
100%. I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen. You know, we finally made the decision, which I think for some people would maybe have been harder, but for us, we were at peace with it because my mother knew like he did not want to live if he told you that. 100%. So it was so strange because we went from, taking shifts round the clock. It was like we wanted him to live so badly. And then when we pulled all the life support, we wanted him to pass.
Yeah.
And what happens is sometimes if you wait too long, they can live, right? So after we pulled his life support, he lived for, it was almost a whole nother 24 hours, I think. It was a while.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were actually at one point, we were worried, like, oh my gosh, did we wait too long? Because his heart was healthy. It's this weird dynamic of like, you want them to live so badly and then you want them just to pass. Like there's a hole in your heart that's never going to go away. And it's uncomfortable to talk about. It makes other people uncomfortable. And I think that's one of the things why I didn't talk about it for so long, because it's been 20 something years and I still cry. So my brother is buried next to my grandfather, but I've only been there one time because I don't feel like he's there,
My grandfather was my first significant loss.
Yes.
And it took me years to go to the cemetery. I guess I was in denial. I just didn't want to accept it. So what made you for 2 years feel like I couldn't process telling anybody my brother had passed?
I did tell some people at my work about my brother, but it wasn't like they already knew. So it wasn't like introducing myself to somebody every day. When I became a flight attendant again, and it's like small talk, right? Oh, where are you from? Oh, do you have any brothers or sisters? So I was constantly asked these questions about my life. And I didn't feel comfortable. I know it makes people uncomfortable. So I just would say, yes, I have a sister.
You just wouldn't.
I just wouldn't even acknowledge it. And I've talked to my mom about it, and my mom did the same thing.
She did too?
She did. People do not know what to say to you, especially as a mother who loses a son.
For sure.
It's different. So I felt like because I didn't want to make other people uncomfortable too, I didn't want to be uncomfortable. I just wouldn't address it, which is not really the right thing to do. But that is kind of, I think, what a lot of people do, even with just in general. If they don't want to talk about it or they think it's going to make somebody feel uncomfortable, they just don't even bring it up.
Yeah.
So
do you remember the time where you felt like, so you go 2 years of, kind of not really talking about them? And was there a moment that you were okay?
Yeah, I do remember. I was actually on the airplane working, and this lady had a shirt on. And it was like a whitewater tour shirt. And my brother used to be a guide doing that. And the shirt said something Durango, Colorado. And I said something to the woman. She came up to the front and I said, oh, Durango's beautiful. My brother used to live there. And she looked at me. She goes, oh my goodness, why would he ever leave? It is so beautiful there. I said, he passed away. He didn't, She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I just felt like at some point it was like, I was always kind of angry at the woman, which is so stupid. Like, why did he leave? Well, he didn't have a choice. He passed away. But after I said it one time, it just kind of got a little easier.
Yeah.
It's not the first thing I would tell people. I would just keep it simple. I have a brother, he passed away in an accident, like 20 years ago. I've talked to my mom about this too. I think time just heals it doesn't heal, but it's just time. Everybody processes things on a different timeline. And some people are okay talking about things right away and other people are not. And for me, I just needed time. And it was just like that moment, just something went off and I felt like, you know what? I have a brother.
So painful when you lose someone. Mm-hmm. Like it really is. It's so painful. And, how do we get someone to feel comfortable admitting it almost from the beginning instead of isolating?
I think probably like now that I'm looking at my, older self, I probably should have done some sort of like therapy, right?
I can't even comprehend the loss of a child. I
think my mom was at peace because she was really close with my brother and knew all these things about my brother. Like she knew what he wanted.
Yeah, because his thing was like, I'm not going to live till I'm 40.
My mom would say, why would you say that, Jason?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I just know I'm not going to be 40.
He was a wild soul.
He was wild. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But yeah, I think we all have to do things on our own terms. And I think it's just time. I don't know that there's any one solution for how to process it, how to grieve it. But I would definitely say I was just running from it, you know?
So you have a son. Tell us about Jason and the journey with Jason.
Okay. So I meet my husband to get married, and, you know, he's a little older than me, so he wanted to have kids a little sooner. I have my son, name him Jason William, after my brother. So I get pregnant with Jason, and everything is like, my pregnancy's super easy. I had him a couple weeks early. He's jaundiced when he's born, but I mean, I thought it was this huge, crazy deal, realizing now that, I was jaundiced too. I was like this big and jaundiced. I was like a little orange thing. But when you're a new mom, you just think everything is the end of the world, and you're not sleeping, going for the 4-month checkup. And I started to feel normal again a little bit. You know, they take the clothes off and they're looking at his body and checking everything. Our doctor says, does anybody in your family have neurofibromatosis? And I'm like, no, what is it? And she's like, well, I don't want you to go Googling anything. I just think we need to do some more testing. And I said, well, why do you say that? And so my son was born with like 2 or 3 little birthmarks. There's like one on his neck and like a big one on his hip, which is normal. He had little spots. They were very faint, like almost looked like freckles in a sense too. So what do you think my husband does? He Googles it. The image that pops up is a man with just these protruding, humongous tumors, and he's completely disfigured all over his face. And I'm like, holy, what is happening? So I'm like, no, okay, maybe this isn't true. Maybe he doesn't have it. In the back of my mind, though, after doing the more Googling and looking, I already pretty much knew that he did, because you don't just develop birthmarks, right? They call them cafe au lait spots. So we did more testing, and we did genetic testing. And then sure enough, I think it was like maybe a month later, all of it came back, and they formally diagnosed him with neurofibromatosis type 1. And a lot of people would just call it NF because that's the shorter term. So I'm a new mom. I'm like, my baby's 4 months old. I have no family around me. I'm like, what did I do wrong? Is this my fault? Do I have this? Does somebody in my family have this? You're thrown into this like world of unknowns, right? And once you start Googling it, there's people that have NF that have very normal lives, and there's people with NF that die. There's not a specific path that what's going to happen. So it's unknown. And I think in the beginning, I'm like, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. I would just sit there and Google. I think we both were scared to death. But I will say is because we found out when he was really little. Some people don't find out until they're adults. I've got a friend that he went in for a dental procedure, and he found out at 40 years old he has NF. So I think we were fortunate we found out early because we were proactive. With NF, a lot of times you have other issues. So NF is basically anywhere you have a nerve ending in your body, you can develop a tumor. And the tumors are normally not cancerous, but they can be in spots that can cause problems. So there's a lot of watching and waiting, monitoring. A lot of children with NF will have ADHD, they'll have autism, scoliosis. It's all along that neurological pathway.
Yeah.
So at 14 months old, I put Jason in speech therapy, occupational therapy, pretty much any therapy I could do. That is one of the main reasons why Jason is probably as successful as he's been today. It's hard to admit that something is going on with your child, especially if you think you did everything right. Some things just happen. But what I could do after that fact is be my kid's advocate and do everything I can to help him along the way. Early intervention is key with any child that's got something going on.
We think of ourselves even as adults going to the doctor at this age, and people put it off. And it's like, if you can go to the doctor and something's wrong and you can catch it early, there's tons of things you can do, whether it's through the doctor, holistic, it doesn't, whatever your approach is, but we put it off. We want to live sometimes in denial. Hard to accept that anything, because we want our kids to just be okay. And, we want to protect them, and to have to admit that can be almost like we feel like we failed.
Yes.
You've been proactive, and I know he does MRIs.
That's where you start.
Yeah.
Some people have tumors that grow outward. Some people have them that grow inward. Looks can be deceiving because he has brain tumors on the inside. For a long time, I didn't tell a lot of people about neurofibromatosis because it was hard to talk about, and nobody knows what it is. 1 in 2,500 people are born with NF, so it's not even really considered that rare. But I think because of the different cases of it, like if you look at my son, you don't think anything is.
No,
he looks right.
Yeah.
It's like, Down syndrome, somebody has Down syndrome.
Yeah.
Cerebral palsy, somebody has cerebral palsy. But NF is like, you just don't, you can't always tell. So we started doing MRIs with Jason when he was 1 to get a baseline. And there was nothing there when he was 1. We move here and we do a scan, and then, we go into the room, and, he has 2 tumors in his optic nerves. I'll never forget. Noel and I just are like, oh my God, this is happening now. We have to start doing the scans. We do them every year. He's like 2.5, 3. I think he probably is autistic to an extent. He's probably more high functioning because he didn't even have an autism diagnosis yet at this point. But he did things. He was very repetitive, very hyper-focused, lined things up, photographic memory. The kid was reading when he was like 2 years old. He was so smart, but, he couldn't understand what he was reading, but he could sound things out. But as far as, retaining information or having the social skills, he was affectionate with me, and he is affectionate, but that was the hard piece of diagnosing him. And I didn't want to, he already had a diagnosis of NF. I didn't want to diagnose him with anything else until I knew for sure. I spent so much time in the waiting room of children's health therapy centers. I went 2-3 times a week, see all these moms come in, and maybe I have nothing in common with them outside of this, right? But we're all there for the same reason, for our children. And one thing I always tried to do was get up and get ready for the day. Because there was a point where I was in that bathrobe and I was struggling so badly inside. I always felt like I had to do something to make myself feel okay.
I feel the same way. It's important because it's easy to forget about yourself.
I can't tell you how many times I would go and just scream and cry in the shower and then come out and be like, all right, I'm ready to go. Let's go. Because I was in such a dark place for a long time. I had to pretend I was okay.
When you're in a dark spot, it's hard to just look at yourself. You go from like NF, then all of a sudden he starts having, the other issues that come along with that. A mom out there, that has special needs.
People treat you differently. I didn't want him to be treated differently, or I realized people treated me differently when they found out. So I was very private about the tumors and the NF because I felt that it was just like a stigma around it. Now, this is when Jason's in kindergarten, and he's having some trouble with behavior issues and getting overwhelmed. We have a great team of people at the school, and I have amazing therapists here. Miss Janine Roddy, who literally probably is the best therapist I've ever encountered in my life. She taught me almost everything I need to know. She was really the reason that I even learned about, what you can do for your kids. Find somebody like a mentor almost. I would say to her, what would you do if it was your kid? You just have to be involved, and you have to fight, whether it's autism, dyslexia, whatever it is. You have to be the parent, and you have to be on top of it. So if you think that something's going on, 100% use your voice. My brother dying has shaped my whole adult years, right? I have thick skin. I tell people all the time this. Go to Children's Hospital and spend the night there. You will look at your life so different. You won't care about the soccer games or did they win the championship. Children's Hospital will humble you right to your core. I knew I was leaving that place with my son. There's a lot of people that don't. My stomach just turns because there's that many sick kids. There's that many parents grieving. We had good health insurance. I don't worry about how's my mortgage going to get paid. I know people who are going to lose their home because they can't pay their bills.
I don't know how much you want to talk about, which we kind of haven't talked about, autism.
That's now what my main concern for a long time was NF. And it still is my main concern, right?
Yeah.
But the autism piece that he has is because, you can be the smartest person in the room, but if you can't have relationships and you can't have problem-solving skills and you can't regulate your emotions, that's what it takes to be successful. It's relationships and in how you form things in your adult years. And if you can't get along with others, or you have issues, processing your emotions and regulating them, it's very hard to be successful. We just try to teach him coping skills, and he's had to learn all of that. When your kids are little and they throw tantrums or they're acting a funny way, it's not so noticeable. Like if you're at the grocery store and you see a 3-year-old laying on the floor crying, you don't think anything of it. When you see a 7-year-old doing that, you're like, what's wrong with them?
That's one of the things too you've mentioned that kind of sticks with me too, of the journey of, because your son, he fits in with any other kid. And I know you've struggled with that.
Oh, yeah.
People thinking this 8 or 9-year-old kid who's acting out like a toddler, or people are judging the situation because they don't know how to handle that. Bringing more awareness to families in general. We need to talk about kids that have these issues so that their kids, when they're going to school, can relate to them.
I have spent my whole child's life trying to teach Jason how to be normal in society, right? But we also need to teach the typical children. I'm spending so much time and energy trying to basically form my child to fit in with everything else. Really, the typical children can learn this much easier if you can keep your child in regular education settings. The more he's around normal peer models, the more he'll pick up from that. Like, if you can, always fight for him to stay in general education. And that's what I've always done. So I think it is hard as a mom, you know, and a dad when they get to a certain age and they start acting like that because you feel judged. Going on vacations, I'm already stressed about it. Having a child with autism, especially a severely autistic child, your family, you can't go on vacations. I mean, you can, but it's not even a vacation. I mean, some kids are so severe that, I mean, any little thing will set them off. So the added pressure of having a special needs child, the day-to-day things that people take for granted, riding a bike, going to a restaurant, I don't know, the loud car that goes by, that's like a dream. It would be a dream for an autistic parent, you know, that would just, they can't even fathom it.
You volunteer once a week and you're saying how there's these moms coming up to you, basically sharing the struggles that they have with special needs. And they feel alone. They feel you can relate, right?
Oh, what I know now is I would have probably tried to find more people in a situation similar to me. And it does affect relationships. It just does. I mean, you know, when the kids are younger, it's one thing. But once the kids start to grow up, I mean, it's different. You know, Jason doesn't have things in common with, you know, some of the kids that he used to play with when they were 5, right? So I think finding your people, finding a support system. I never wanted to join these support groups because they depressed me. Like, I didn't want to just be friends with somebody because their kid had NF or because they were autistic, right? I mean, I wanted to have friends that were my friends, you know, and I don't have a huge friend circle. I have a small group of friends that I'm open and vulnerable with. It's really important. You have to find a group of people that you can relate to. I'm volunteering. And yes, I'm seeing these moms come in. And I think for me, just to look at them in the eye and, you know, just say, listen, I promise you things will get better. You know, you're just finding out about this. It's overwhelming. Try to take care of yourself. Give yourself grace. I know I'm not a perfect parent. I know I made a lot of mistakes, you know, but don't be hard on yourself because really none of us know exactly what we're doing. I still get emotional about my brother, my son, you know, the life, the journey. If I'm able to help a couple of moms and lead them in the right direction, I think out of all this, Teresa, my son, Jason, has just really taught me it could always be worse. I think one of the things I always stress them is like, find something for yourself. You know, I do like the triathlons and the ultra running and all that stuff. I like to, you know, push myself and make my son realize I can do hard things. I don't ever want my son to quit. I still don't know what his journey's like. Could go in next year for a scan and he could have another brain tumor. I think sometimes we have to just realize that this is our situation and take the good from it, make the bad stuff into good stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to do. I mean, like there are days I just want to scream and I'm angry, you know, and it's hard. It's hard on your friendships, even my own family. And it's funny how I forget about it. Because I think it was PTSD type thing where you just block out those memories. Talking to you about, I remember all these different things like, holy cow, that was a journey. That was a process.
Well, and I think when we're in high stressful environments, we're just surviving. At some point, everything started when we were younger. We can sit in a situation and I can actually use my divorce. When my divorce happened, it's like devastating. And it almost seemed devastating on an extreme level. But what I realized is it really wasn't just the divorce in that moment. And so I had to go back, and that's where I had a lot more guilt too. It was like, wow, I didn't show up in this particular way. Well, that makes sense. That it's based on my younger years. Is there something that you feel that you're like, this really changed the trajectory in your life?
I mean, I really think, honestly, my whole life, probably my brother dying is probably the thing that changed my whole entire perspective. And I think talking about things, I talk well now about things and my feelings, but I did not when I was younger. I just kind of suppressed everything. Being able to openly talk about things, saying what you need, what you want, and don't be afraid of I was afraid of making other people uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable telling people that. And then I finally got comfortable. Then I have my son who has these issues and I'm uncomfortable saying that because, I mean, let's face it, it's the first time I met you and I'm like, yeah, my son has 4 brain tumors. You're probably like, holy shit. Like, what do you say? Just put it out there. The longer you basically sweep it under the rug or you don't talk about it, the longer you just hold on to it. Just be your best. And it's hard to be authentic like that. It's hard to talk about things.
Being authentic for me personally has been one of the best journeys, with being present, being real, being happy. To be our most authentic self, to me, is the best way to live life. I mean, not be afraid of what other people are going to think.
We are really quick to judge people on certain things.
Do you think you judge yourself?
Maybe at some point, maybe in the past.
The reason why I say that, I think when you judge yourself and don't give yourself grace, I don't think you can give yourself love. I just don't. I think that that's a constant internal, how can you love yourself if you're constantly judging? I'm not good enough, or I didn't achieve enough, or whatever that, we're always kind of on to the next thing. And sitting here, I can actually, I'm in my late 40s, finally sit here. I've never been happier, but to get here was a long road of not loving myself and not having self-worth and not having self-respect. And finally, wholeheartedly being super authentic, saying the things I don't necessarily want to say, but that wasn't always the case. It's hard to love yourself.
Yeah.
That's a difficult journey, to not have the negative side versus the side going, you're so lovable. You deserve everything. You deserve happiness. You deserve joy. When you have loving people around you and you strip away all of the material things.
Well, that's a relation, because the fact that Jason doesn't ride a bike, it's not a problem for Jason. It was a problem for us. We have these ideas and images of what we think our life's going to be like. I think sometimes if you're denying things and you're not going to admit it, you're only going to hurt your whole family in the long run.
I think of going through my divorce too, and how I've lived in denial. I'm probably 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't get my head wrapped around getting a divorce. And it's because my parents divorced when I was, 6, 7, and I couldn't have a broken family. I look at my family now. I don't know how we got here other than ultimately love. I would say the foundation, somehow it led us back to a good, healthy relationship between me and the kid's dad, and our kids turned out amazing, but I couldn't process getting a divorce. I felt like a failure. I wanted to fix it. And how do we put it back together? I would say that I think things sometimes happen for a reason. You talk about the positives of Jason, making you a better human. Some of the biggest lessons in my life going through the divorce. One was self-love. Well, I would have never learned that sitting in my marriage. I just wouldn't have. We outgrew each other way before the divorce happened. You know what I mean? And I think he's probably a better person now with the person that he's with. He can maybe talk to her in a different way. He came to the door the other day, and it was funny. It was the first time I was like, wow, thank you for divorcing me, because our kid had turned out okay and we were both happy. And I was like, wow, the divorce wasn't pain anymore. It was like, I saw the good in what that divorce brought. And when you're in it, it's hard. But again, I lived in the denial too. So the problem with the denial, that was my point to it. I lost 2 years of my life living in denial. I mean, you're just functioning. I missed out on my kids. Like, as much as I'm a good, loving mom, and my kids turned out, thankfully, super awesome and lovable. But when you're in denial, you're constantly pushing thoughts to the side and pretending they're not there. That takes up a lot of energy. 2 things I would end with is finding, no matter what you're going through, one safe person to share your pain and release it. You can feel like you have support. You don't feel alone. Somebody can help you move forward. And I would say the other takeaway, like just listening to you, and I've lived my own denial, but I think the challenge with the denial is if you live in the denial in a situation, you are going to miss out on being present in your current life, because you're constantly pushing emotions aside, which are your emotion, to deny yourself of your happiness. You're not living in the present by denying yourself of actually living in those emotions. And, I get that the emotions could be painful, but there's love also that go along with that. And you're not able to do that.
We all have a lot to be thankful for, even like when the days are hard and things are bad. I mean, like, we're all still breathing, right? Like, I think about my mom. I'm trying to be very selective of what I complain to my mom about, like even with my son, because she doesn't have hers. Her son's gone. We all can get consumed with our own lives, but I think every day I have my son still. Maybe my purpose is to spread awareness, help somebody else.